students. In continuation with your topic of management of diabetes mellitus, in the last lecture you have had your teachings regarding the uses of insulin in relation to type 1 as well as the type 2 diabetes mellitus. So further advancing in the topic, we have today the oral hypoglycemic drugs. The objective of this class would be to understand and classify the oral hypoglycemics and anti-diabetic agents. We will understand the different mechanism of action between the commonly used oral hypoglycemic drugs and anti-diabetic agents. We will also know the use and adverse effects of oral hypoglycemics and anti-diabetic agents, and we will explain the limitations of oral hypoglycemics and anti-diabetics in management of diabetes. So what is diabetes mellitus? We will just have a quick recap because you have already gone through the introductory lecture as well as the management with insulin. So coming to the diabetes mellitus, what happens here is there is an elevated blood glucose associated with absent or inadequate pancreatic insulin secretion. It can be with or without concurrent impairment of insulin action. So now we come to the types of diabetes mellitus. This also have been taken already and you have read it in your physiology classes also. So we can classify into 4 categories. Type 1, insulin dependent diabetes, which has to be treated with only supplement insulin and no other management will work for this type of diabetes. Then you have type 2, which is also known as non-insulin dependent diabetes, or you can call it maturity onset diabetes mellitus. This non-insulin dependent diabetes means that the patient is not totally dependent on the external insulin supplementation, and the other means of managements are also possible. Then you have type 3 or others, which can be MODY, which is maturity onset diabetes of the young. And there is another type 4, which is the gestational diabetes mellitus, which occurs at the time of the pregnancy. And I'm sure in the last lectures this has been adequately taken care of. So we will come about today. We will not talk about the management of type 1 or the other. We will just focus on the management of type 2 diabetes mellitus and on the oral mode of therapy. So the oral anti-diabetic drugs are of value only in the treatment of type 2 non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. This condition where the drugs are required is where the condition of non-NIDDM cannot be controlled by diet or exercise alone. These drugs may also be used with insulin in the management of some patients with diabetes mellitus, and if we use the oral hypoglycemics or anti-hyperglycemic drugs along with insulin, it might decrease the insulin doses in some of the individuals. Mind you, it is not used in this group of drugs, is not at all used in the type 1 diabetes mellitus. So here we come to the drug treatments for type 2 diabetes mellitus. We have 2 broad groups of agents used to treat type 2 diabetes mellitus, and these are, one group is the oral hypoglycemic agents, meaning these drugs are given by oral route and they produce decrease in the glucose level, that making them hypoglycemic agents. So the drugs under these categories are sulfonylurea and meglitidenide. There is another broad group which is known as the anti-hyperglycemic agent. Now what is anti-hyperglycemic agent? That means they do not let the glucose level go up. That is anti-hyperglycemic. The hypoglycemic means they will lower the glucose level. It could be normal glucose level which can be lowered, or the glucose level which is more than the normal, that also gets decreased. But in anti-hyperglycemic group, the glucose is getting decreased only when it is in hyperglycemic level and not in the normal level. So under these groups we have the biguanides, under which falls the metformin. Then you have another group, alpha glucosidase inhibitors. Then you have thiazolidinediones, under which comes the glitazones. Then you have incretin mimetics. Then you have DPP-4 inhibitors. You have sodium glucose co-transporter 2 inhibitors, and you have amylin receptor agonists. These are the gross, this is the pictorial presentation of the gross site of action of oral therapies for type 2 diabetes mellitus. So the drugs which act at the pancreas where there is impaired in the insulin secretion. So you have meglitinide analogs and sulfonylurea. Here at the gut level, there is absorption of the glucose. Here alpha glucosidase inhibitors act. All these are leading to hyperglycemia. And at the level of the liver, where there is formation of neoglucogenesis, there the drugs like metformin and biguanides act, and the thiazolidinediones group act at the adipose tissues, where they prevent the breakdown of the fat to make more glucose. Again we come to a pictorial presentation. So GIT tract, these drugs prevent the gastric emptying. They prolong the gastric emptying. So this will be GLP-1 analogs, amylin analogs. Here this again along these routes only, glucosidases are inhibited by alpha glucosidase inhibitors. So, and there is delay in the blood glucose level achieving from the absorption from GIT tract. Then here you have endogenous insulin from beta cells or exogenous insulin which is provided in the bloodstream. Thereby insulin causes the utilization of glucose and that goes to the tissues. In the other tissues, glucose is metabolized. In the muscle cells, again, with the help of insulin, glucose is converted into glycogen. In the action of thiazolidinediones, they act at the PPAR gamma and here insulin. So, in the adipose tissue, as in the last slide we talked about, adipose tissue, thiazolidinediones. So, here it will block this conversion of triglycerides to glucose. And the other groups, biguanides, GLP-1 analogs, DPP-4 inhibitors and amylin analogs, they will also prevent the gluconeogenesis. This is the normal cycle of gluconeogenesis. From the liver, glucose is converted to glycogen and glycogen is converted to glucose in case of gluconeogenesis. Here glucagon will help. So biguanides here, they break this cycle and prevent the glycogen from getting converted to the glucose. There can be another way of classifying the treatment of the drugs for the treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus, and here we talk to them according to the action by which they reduce the blood glucose in the blood. So drug enhances the insulin secretion. This is the way by which the glucose secretion is glucose concentration is lowered is by drugs which enhance the insulin secretion. Then in diabetes mellitus type 2 patients, there is found to be resistance to insulin action. So there is one group of drug, we can classify it under the drug which overcomes the insulin resistance. Then as we have just talked about, GLP-1 and other drugs which inhibit the or retard the carbohydrate absorption in the GIT, so drugs which retard carbohydrate absorption. And then we can club the rest of the drugs under the miscellaneous drugs. So now we come to the classification. So this is the potassium ATP channel blockers, under which comes the meglitinide or phenylalanine analogs. Under these drugs we have rapaglinide and nataclinide. Another group of drug under the potassium ATP channel blocker is the sulfonylurea. Sulfonylurea have tolbutamide, then they have glipizide, glimepiride, gliblenclamide and gliclazide. So this comes under the potassium channel blockers. Potassium channel blockers would be megliteinide, phenylalanine analogs or sulfonylureas. Second group would be dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors. We call them DPP4 inhibitors, dipeptidyl peptidase inhibitors. Under this comes the sitagliptin, vildagliptin, then you have saxagliptin, teneligliptin, you have elogliptin and linagliptin. Then in the third group or the second broad group, which comes under the drugs to overcome the insulin resistance. Under this we have the biguanides, which are the potassium AMP activators, a drug under which is metformin. Then you have thiazolidinediones, which is the PPAR gamma activator, drug under which is pioglitazone. The third broad category, drug that retard carbohydrate absorption, is the alpha glucosidase inhibitor, under which comes the acarbose, miglitol and voglibose. Under the miscellaneous drugs, we have sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitor. Sodium glucose cotransport 2 inhibitors. The drugs under this group is dapagliflozin and canagliflozin. And then you have dopamine D2 agonist, under which comes the bromocriptine. So coming to the details regarding the oral hypoglycemic drugs. As I previously mentioned, these are the agents used in treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus. So oral hypoglycemics, that means they have the potential to decrease the blood glucose to subnormal level. That is, even if the glucose is normal, they can decrease that blood glucose level if this group of drug is given. They also promote the insulin release from the pancreatic beta cells. So they might be useful in patients who have resistance to insulin secretion. So as I mentioned in the classification, two classes of oral hypoglycemic agents are there, sulfonylurea and megliteinide. So sulfonylurea, we have drugs in the category of generations. In the first generation is the tolbutamide and chlorpropamide. And in the second generation, we have gliblencamide, glyburide, glipizide, gliclazide and glimepiride. All the first generation compounds except tolbutamide is not in use nowadays, and tolbutamide is also used infrequently. So we will talk about the group as a whole, sulfonylurea, and not talk about the individual drugs. The second generation drugs, glibenclamide, glyburide, glipizide, gliclazide and glimepiride, they are being used, and first generation tolbutamide is used but very sparingly. So what is the mechanism of action of sulfonylurea? So sulfonylurea acts at they bind with the specific sulfonylurea receptors, which is also known as SUR1. And where is this sulfonylurea receptor located? This sulfonylurea receptor is located at the pancreatic beta cell membrane. And when they bind, they are stimulated and they provoke the brisk release of insulin. The rate of insulin secretion at any glucose concentration, if these SUR1 receptors are stimulated, the rate of insulin secretion at any glucose concentration will be increased, and that means that insulin release can be provoked even at a low glucose concentration. So what does it mean? The consequences is that there is less risk of severe unpredictable hypoglycemia, and so one has to be careful when we are prescribing sulfonylurea so that the patient does not go into hypoglycemia. This drug has also one of the mechanism of preventing the hepatic degradation of insulin or slowing it. So, hepatic degradation of insulin is also slowed down. So, this is the picturesque representation from your textbook. So, again the same thing is being repeated. Increase insulin release from the pancreas. A minor action of reduction in serum glucagon levels by increasing insulin and somatostatin release. What it does is there is closure of potassium channel here in extra pancreatic tissue. So here this is blocked. So when this is blocked, depolarizes cell, glucose transporter, here metabolism, potassium channel is blocked, depolarization is there, and calcium channel is depolarized, channel open, and calcium goes inside, increase in the calcium, insulin stimulated, and exocytosis. So this is the whole cascade of reaction. What happens? Sulfonylurea binding to the sulfonylurea 1 receptor at the membrane of the beta cells of the pancreas, exhibits the flux of potassium, inhibits the, this is inhibition not exhibition, so I am sorry, inhibits the flux of potassium ion, then there is depolarization, then opens a voltage gated calcium channel. So this voltage gated calcium channel causes a calcium influx and causes the release of preformed insulin. Taking further the mechanism of action, what happens in type 2 diabetes mellitus, that the speed with which the insulin should be released in response to glucose or food in type 2 diabetes mellitus is either delayed or it is subdued. That is kinetics of insulin release. That is speed with which the insulin is released in normal people like me and you. When we have meal or you take a glucose drink, there will be adequate release of insulin which will take the care of the glucose. But in diabetes, type 2 diabetes mellitus, this is delayed or subdued, less. So when you are using sulfonylureas, what happens? So there are two phases of release of the insulin, the first phase and the second phase. The first phase is immediate and the second phase is a little delayed. So there is increase in the second phase of insulin secretion under the use of sulfonylureas. They have very little effect on the first phase. And for the sulfonylurea to act, at least the presence of 30% functional beta cells are essential. If there is no functional beta cell, then sulfonylurea will not be able to act. And this has been further confirmed in cases of taking this drug effect in pancreatectomized animals where they do not cause hypoglycemia. And it has been used in type 1 diabetes mellitus patients also, where there is no active isolate cells or beta cells. So there is no release of insulin. So they do not cause hypoglycemia in cases of pancreatectomized animals or in type 1 diabetes mellitus. So they have no direct action, sulfonylureas, they have indirect action through the pancreas. They have some extra pancreatic action as well. So, what is this extra pancreatic action? So, they cause decline in the insulinomic action after a few months of use of sulfonylurea. There is a decline in the insulinomic action. That means the action by which they cause increase in the insulin release in the second phase of insulin release, that insulinomic action is decreased after a few months of use. And it is thought that there is downregulation of sulfonylurea receptors on beta cells. But still, there is improvement in the glucose tolerance. So, the glucose tolerance improvement which was there with the sulfonylureas is still maintained. So, the hypothesis is that sulfonylureas sensitize target tissues, here liver, to insulin action, and so there is long-term improvement in carbohydrate tolerance and there is overall decrease in the circulating insulin concentration. So, what they do is reverse the downregulation of insulin receptors. Apparently, there is increase in the number of receptors and increase in post-receptor translation of receptor activation. Coming to the pharmacokinetics of sulfonylurea, all sulfonylureas are given orally, they are well absorbed orally, and more than they have 90% postprandial blood value, 90% or more than that. They have a low volume of distribution, that is 0.2 to 0.41 4 liters per kg. For the metabolism, they might produce active metabolite as well as the inactive metabolite. Whether it is active metabolite or the inactive metabolite, they are all excreted in the urine. So, when we give sulfonylureas to patients who have compromised liver or kidney, we should have exercised some caution. For the drug interaction, whenever there is a drug interaction, that means patient is already taking some other drug and the action of that drug is causing some effect on the sulfonylurea action. So, it could be that the drug might enhance sulfonylurea action or it might decrease the sulfonylurea action. So, first we come to the drugs that enhance the sulfonylurea action, and which drugs which enhance the sulfonylurea action, that is sulfonylurea is causing hypoglycemia, so it may precipitate more hypoglycemia. So, the group of drugs are drugs which displace these sulfonylureas from protein binding. That is, these groups of drugs have the same plasma protein to which they bind. So, when they are given, so there is less plasma protein available for the binding. So, either the sulfonylurea gets attached or these drugs get attached. So, either one will have the increased concentration in the circulation, and thereby they will be having increased action. So, you have in this group phenylbutazone, sulfenpyrazone, salicylates and sulfonamides. There could be another group which can inhibit the metabolism or excretion of these drugs. So, they might be competing with the excretion in the kidney and the metabolism in the liver enzymes. So, these drugs are cimetidine, warfarin, ketoconazole, chloramphenicol, sulfonamides and acute alcohol intake. Then you have drugs which synergize with or prolong pharmacodynamic action. Here the drugs can have salicylate, lithium, theophylline and propranolol, which is a non-selective beta blocker. Cardioselective beta blockers have less liability. And then you have sympatholytic antihypertensives, alcohol also by inhibiting the gluconeogenesis. Then comes the another group, drugs that decrease the sulfonylurea action. The previous group was the drug which increased the sulfonylurea action, that is increasing the hypoglycemic action of the sulfonylurea. Here they are decreasing the sulfonylurea action, that means there is decrease in the hypoglycemic action. So there is more hyperglycemia or the blood glucose control is jeopardized. So what they do is, if the drug is getting faster metabolized, then less drug is there to act on the pancreas and induce the insulin release. So, these drugs which induce its metabolism are the phenobarbital, phenytoin, rifampin and chronic alcoholism. The opposite effect which suppresses the insulin release, there are certain drugs which suppress the insulin disease, and in the last slides we discussed that the sulfonylurea causes indirect action through the pancreas by increasing the insulin release. So, these drugs which cause opposite action of suppressing insulin release are the corticosteroids, thiazides, furosemide and oral contraceptives. What are the adverse effects of the sulfonylureas? So the adverse effects are quite low, only 3 to 7%. So the first and foremost side effect is the effect of hypoglycemia. So the effect of hypoglycemia is common as it is the first oral hypoglycemic drug. So as the name suggests, it is causing hypoglycemia, and in the mechanism also we discussed that hypoglycemia means it will be decreasing the normal glucose level also. So we have to be very careful whether the patient has taken his or her meal or not, and then only the drug should be taken. So hypoglycemia, this is common side effect. It is occasionally severe and can be rarely very fatal. Hypoglycemic side effect is more common in the elderly and with people who have liver and kidney disease. That means liver and kidney are going to metabolize the sulfonylureas. If they are diseased, then the more of the dose is still remaining for a longer time in the circulation, and it will when they are present in the circulation, they will be continuing to lower the blood glucose level and thereby causing hypoglycemia. And whenever there is another potentiating drug added, such as insulin or another group of drug like metformin, so these drugs can lower the blood glucose again, which could be life-threatening. One of the drugs, taubiltamide, which is less used now, it causes the lowest risk as low potency, and it has got short duration of action. So whenever a patient on sulfonylurea has got hypoglycemia, what is the treatment? You have to give glucose, plain glucose. You don't give any other form. You have to give glucose, and you have to give it for a few doses because the hypoglycemia may reoccur. Then there could be non-specific side effects like gain in weight of 1 to 3 kgs, which could be the consequence of insulinemic action of sulfonylurea. There could be nausea, vomiting, flatulence, diarrhea, constipation. There could be headache. There could be paresthesia, which is mostly infrequent and mild. What is the status of safety of sulfonylureas during the pregnancy? This has not been established, and one is advised to change over to insulin whenever the diabetic patient, type 2 diabetic patient is pregnant. Whether sulfonylurea is secreted in milk? Yes, it is secreted in milk, and it should not be given if the lady is lactating. There is another much talked about or important side effect, which is the side effect of hypersensitivity. So hypersensitivity could be in the form of rashes, it could be in the form of photosensitivity, it could be in the form of purpura, transient leukopenia, or rarely agranulocytosis, or it could be in the form of flushing or disulfiram-like reaction. This is only in some of the patients taking sulfonylurea. So disulfiram-like reaction is not very common. In case of taubiltamide, there is one specific side effect that it decreases the iodide uptake by the thyroid, but that does not lead it to hypothyroidism. So this finishes with the sulfonylurea group. Now we come to the second group of drug in the oral hypoglycemic category, which is the meglitinide, or we can call it D-phenylalanine analog. Also works at the as potassium channel blocking drug. So these drugs are quick and short lasting insulinemic action. So which are the drugs? Rapaglinide. Rapaglinide is designed to normalize mealtime glucose excursion. Whenever we are having food, there is sudden increase in the level of the blood glucose. For that, this drug is designed, rapaglinide. This is not a sulfonylurea, but it acts in the analogous manner to the sulfonylureas. How? It binds to the same sulfonylurea receptor, causes the closure of the ATP sensitive potassium channel, then there is depolarization, and there is insulin release. So how it works? It is quickly absorbed, rapidly metabolized, the onset is fast, and there is a short lasting insulin release. So the characteristic pattern of use is different from the sulfonylureas. Sulfonylureas were acting at the second phase of the insulin release. Here they are fast onset and short lasting. So they are administered before each major meal and they control the postprandial hyperglycemia. If the patient forgets to have his or her meal, then dose is to be omitted. And since they have short lasting action, they have less risk of serious hypoglycemia unlike sulfonylureas, and they have less chances of weight gain and they have less allergenic than compared to the sulfonylureas. So what are the indications of prapaglinide? These are indicated only in selected type 2 diabetics who have pronounced postprandial hyperglycemia. So there are different characteristics of different diabetic patients. So in type 2 patients who have pronounced postprandial hyperglycemia, that is after meal they have huge surge in the blood glucose level, they are the candidates, and this can be supplemented with metformin or long acting insulin. The onset of action is within 1 hour and duration could be for 4 to 5 hours. Dose is 0.25 mg to 4 mg before each major meal. What are the adverse effects? There can be mild headache, dyspepsia, arthralgia and weight gain, and this is to be avoided in liver disease patients. Another drug from this group of phenylalanine derivative is the nataglinide. This again principally stimulates the first phase of insulin secretion. Same mechanism of action, closure of beta cell potassium ATP channel. It has got even more faster onset, shorter lasting hyperglycemia. This is ingested only 10 minutes before meals and limits the postprandial hyperglycemia without causing any late hypoglycemia. It has got little effect on fasting blood glucose level. That is, if the patient has not taken anything, then it will not lower the blood glucose. Hypoglycemic effect is less frequent than with the sulfonylureas. What are the adverse effects? The patient can become dizzy, it may have nausea, flu-like symptoms, joint pain. They are used in type 2 diabetes mellitus along with other antidiabetics. Why they are used? They are used to control the postprandial rise in blood glucose. So this finishes with the oral hypoglycemic drug. Now you have the next broad group, which is anti-hyperglycemic agent. So what is different to this anti-hyperglycemic agent, which is not there in the oral hypoglycemic agent? Anti-hypoglycemic agents are a category of drugs capable of lowering elevated level of blood glucose. The catchword here is elevated level of blood glucose. They have relatively little potential to produce hypoglycemia, that is, with the normal glucose level will not be decreased. And none of these drugs promote insulin release. So their mechanism of action is not through the release of insulin. So under this broad heading of anti-hyperglycemic agents, we have drugs like biguanides, under which comes the metformin. Then you have groups like alpha-glucosidase inhibitors. Then you have thiazolidinediones, under which comes the glitazones. Then you have incretin mimetics, then you have DPP-4 inhibitors, you have sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitors, and you have amylin receptor agonists. So coming to the first group, which is the biguanide. So biguanides had two drugs, fenformin and metformin. Fenformin used to cause lot of lactic acidosis and it had less of the long-term effect. So this drug has been discontinued now. That leaves us with metformin. This is the only drug in this class which is being used clinically. So what are the current proposed mechanism of action of metformin? They increase uptake and utilization of glucose by skeletal muscles, which decrease insulin resistance. So whenever there is a food intake, there is absorption and there is increase in the level of the glucose in the blood, there will be increased uptake and utilization by the skeletal muscles. So when this is being done, the resistance to the insulin will be decreased. There is also inhibition of hepatic as well as the renal gluconeogenesis. So that in itself will decrease the hepatic glucose output. So gluconeogenesis, which is the major output of glucose, is inhibited. Now there is another action which causes the slowing of glucose absorption from the GIT. So when this is slowed, then which increases the whenever there is absorption of glucose from the GIT, it increases the availability of glucose for its conversion to lactate by enterocytes. So this slowing of glucose absorption from GIT will increase the availability of glucose which is there in the GIT to be converted to lactate by the enterocytes. They are not getting absorbed. And biguanide metformin also causes the insulin binding, promotion of insulin binding to its receptor. So what is different from the sulfonylurea in this metformin? They do not lower the blood glucose level in normal people. They do not stimulate insulin release. They do not depend on functional pancreatic beta cells for its action. They can be given to obese as doesn't cause weight gain. Unlike sulfonylurea, they cause weight gain. So if there is an obese diabetic, you will not like to prescribe sulfonylurea because it will again cause an increase in the weight gain and the insulin resistance will be more. So this can be given to the obese also. And they have the added benefit of decreasing the LDL and VLDL and the good effect of increasing the HDL levels. So they can be used as monotherapy and they rarely cause hypoglycemia. So what is the mechanism of action of metformin? They activate the AMP activated protein kinase here and reduce the hepatic glucose production. So when this hepatic glucose production is lowered, then it causes lowering of the blood glucose level. So here gluconeogenesis, glucose converted to glycogen normally, and this glycogen in the chances of famine or hunger should be converted to glucose by gluconeogenesis under the influence of glucagon to be used by the body when there is hunger or famine. But in diabetes, there is plenty of blood sugar, excess. There is no famine. So this glycogen conversion to glucose in the gluconeogenesis in the liver cells by the biguanide metformin is arrested. The other groups also suppress the glucagon secretion. In the pharmacokinetics, we can see that the plasma half-life is also short, 2 to 3 hours, but the duration of action is 6 to 10 hours. It is not bound to plasma protein, unlike sulfonylurea, where displacement by other drugs lead to increase or decrease in the action. They are not metabolized. They are excreted unchanged by the kidney. So where they are clinically used? Obviously in the type 2 diabetes mellitus. The advantages are that instead of stimulating appetite, they might cause anorexia. So when there is an obese type 2 diabetic patient, this becomes a drug of first choice because they will not stimulate the appetite, they will cause the anorexia. They can be given in combination with sulfonylurea, meglitinides or glitazones. Why they can be combined with these drugs? To treat the insulin resistance syndrome. And they also decrease the risk of macrovascular as well as the microvascular disease. What are the adverse effects of these group of drugs? Biguanides, metformin. So the drug can cause nausea, metallic taste, anorexia, flatulence. It can cause diarrhea. In 3 to 5% of cases, it may be persistent. And in long-term use of biguanide metformin, it may cause decrease in the absorption of vitamin B12 and additional supplements might be needed. Regarding the lactic acidosis incidence, which is common much common in the sulfonylurea, but here it is rare, but in predisposed patients it can be there. Predisposed patients are renal and hepatic disease patients, hypoxic pulmonary disease patients, or heart failure patients. And why it would be there? Because the drug because these conditions decrease the elimination of the drug or they decrease the tissue oxygenation, thereby leading to lactic acidosis. If a patient is an alcoholic, then alcoholic ingestion can also precipitate severe lactic acidosis, because alcohol potentiates the effect of metformin on lactate metabolism. So it should be avoided. What are the non-diabetic use of metformins? Nowadays we have seen the drugs being used for other actions for which they were not discovered or they were not in use. So here also metformin is used to treat hirsutism in individuals with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So the patients of polycystic ovarian syndrome have hirsutism specifically on the face, which is very distressing to the female. So it can be used to treat that. And the further effect could be that it might enhance the fertility in the woman with PCOD. How? Because it decreases the androgen level and it enhances the insulin sensitivity. So this drug is also being used for treatment of infertility. Now come to the next group of drug, which is the alpha glucosidase inhibitor. Under this heading we have acarbose, miglitol and voglibose. So alpha glucosidase inhibitor. So that means there has to be an enzyme called alpha glucosidase enzyme. What it does? Alpha glucoside enzyme facilitates the digestion of the complex starches into oligosaccharides or disaccharides, and these are converted into monosaccharides, and these monosaccharides are absorbed from the small intestine, and this is also facilitated by the pancreatic amylase. So you can see dietary complex carbohydrates, alpha glucosidase will convert it into monosaccharide, and here it will be absorbed and go to the blood, and from blood to the tissue. And we are using alpha glucosidase inhibitor. So these complex glucose will not be converted into monosaccharides, and thereby it will not be absorbed. So the glucose level in the blood will not rise. So what type of drugs are these alpha glucosidase inhibitors? They are competitive inhibitors. To which receptor or enzyme? They are competitive inhibitors to the intestinal alpha glucosidase and the beta amylase, because these two enzymes are the enzymes which are there helping in the conversion of complex starch to oligo and polyunsaturated fat, and then to the monounsaturated fat, which is getting absorbed. So when we are using alpha glucosidase inhibitor, what happens is that there is decrease in the postprandial digestion and absorption of carbohydrates. There is decrease in the post-meal hyperglycemia. That leads to the less in the concentration of the blood glucose. So after regular use, this group of drug, alpha glucosidase inhibitor, what it will do is it will increase the glycosylated hemoglobin A1C. It will cause decrease in the body weight, and it will decrease the serum triglycerides. Then another group of drug is the acarbose under the heading of alpha glucosidase inhibitor. The dose is 50 to 100 milligram. It is given twice at the beginning of each major meal. The drug is minimally absorbed. Acarbose is minimally absorbed, but miglitol is absorbed. They are not directly affecting the insulin secretion. So what happens to the metabolism? Acarbose, as I said, that it is not absorbed. Some part is excreted as such, and some part is metabolized by the intestinal bacterial flora. What are the adverse effects of this group of drug? Maglitolol and the other one, acarbose. So since there is lot of starch and polyunsaturated polyoligosaccharides in the GIT, so it gets fermented. So due to fermentation of undigested carbohydrates in the lower GIT, what will happen? There will be flatulence, there will be diarrhea, and there might be abdominal pain due to gas production. When these drugs are used all alone, acarbose or miglitolide, they do not cause hypoglycemia by themselves. But when they are added as an add-on drug to sulfonylurea, they might cause hypoglycemia, because this is characteristic of sulfonylurea. If at all, when it is combined with sulfonylurea, acarbose or miglitolol, and it causes hypoglycemia, then it should be corrected by giving glucose and not sucrose, because glucose is the mono sugar, this is the complex sugar, and this will not be, because we have already brought the breakdown causing enzymes, alpha glucosidase and amylin. So don't give sucrose, you have to give glucose. Specific side effect of miglitolol, it can cause mild lactase inhibition, but it does not lead to lactose intolerance. These drugs are contraindicated in inflammatory bowel disease and intestinal obstruction. Obviously, because the fermentation of the complex sugar will lead to problems in these patients. And these drugs can be used as monotherapy in early type 2 diabetes, and if a person is obese type 2 patient of diabetes mellitus, then can be used with sulfonylurea. Then we have another group of drug which is thiazolidinediones. They are also called as glitazones. Under this group we have rosiglitazones and you have pioglitazones. What are the patients who are the most benefited from such use of such glitazones? They are type 2 diabetes patients which are showing sustained amount of insulin resistance. That is, the dose of insulin required for such patients is more than 1 international units per day. So what is the mechanism of action? The proposed mechanism of action for thiazolidinediones is many. So first is the agonist action. So agonist action where at the nuclear receptor of peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma, PPA-PAR gamma. Peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma. They are the agonists at this nuclear receptor, peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma, and these receptors are mainly expressed in the adipose tissue or at the skeletal muscles and the liver. So these are the actual sites where gluconeogenesis, neoglucogenesis occurs. So if this receptor, these are the sites of gluconeogenesis, adipose tissue, skeletal muscles and liver in diabetic type 2 patients, where the increase in the blood sugar level occurs. So this is the agonist at the nuclear receptor, peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma. What they do? They promote transcription of insulin response gene over here. Why promotion of transcription of insulin response gene is needed? Because it will control the glucose and lipid metabolism, and this transcription promotion will lead to increase in the insulin sensitivity and decrease in the insulin resistance in patients of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Second mechanism is that in cell membranes of skeletal muscles and adipose tissues, the glitazones cause increase in the number of glucose transporter 4, and when the transporter 4 number is increased, there is increased peripheral uptake and utilization of glucose. Third mechanism is that they decrease the hepatic output hepatic glucose output by inhibiting the gluconeogenesis. They decrease the glycosylated hemoglobin A1C levels. They increase the HDL-C and decrease the triglycerides level. Specifically, rosiglitazone will cause increase in the LDL cholesterol level. Pioglitazone has variable effect. So, here comes the thiazolidinediones, agonist at the nuclear receptor, peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma, which is expressed mainly in adipose tissue, skeletal muscles and liver. The rosiglitazone and pioglitazone are the derivatives. What they do is, they increase fatty acid translocation, they increase insulin receptor in adipose and hepatocytes, they increase the number of glucose transporter 4 in skeletal muscles and adipose tissue. Pioglitazone is administered at the dose of 11 to 45 mg once per day orally. Duration might be more than 24 hours. Rosiglitazone can be given at the dose of 4 to 8 mg, that also once a day, and duration can be same as more than 24 hours as pioglitazone. So, insulin sensitizing action of glitazones. When it will come, it might take some weeks to develop. If glitazones are added to diabetic regimes, then doses of the other drugs to which it is added, like sulfonylurea, or even if insulin has to be decreased, because it will enhance the insulin sensitivity. So, thereby might cause hypoglycemia by their effect of insulin, sulfonylurea and insulin. So, their dose should be decreased, and they can also be used in combination with metformin, that is biguanides. What are the adverse effects? These drugs can cause weight gain, which can be attributed to the fluid retention and edema. There can be increase in the extravascular fluid. There can be increase in the deposition of subcutaneous fat and hemodilution, which will lead to the concomitant reduction in hemoglobin concentration. Also, regular liver function tests should be done. These drugs, thiazolidinediones like pioglitazone and rosiglitazone, they are contraindicated in hepatic failure, pregnancy and lactation, children, and heart failure because it causes fluid retention. And it can cause ovulation in anovulatory cycles like PCODs because they decrease the insulin resistance. So, we have two drugs which can be used in PCOD infertility cases. We can use metformin and we can use thiazolidinediones also. So, we come to the end of this oral hypoglycemic topic today. Tomorrow we will finish with the rest of the drugs which are there in the anti-hypoglycemic drugs. So, be there for the class tomorrow 4 to 5 p.m. Thank you.